Now we'd like to invite our next one, Dr. Firdous Azim, Professor and Chairperson, Department of English and Humanities, Brack University. Please.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'd really like to thank Hasina Afroz for organizing this wonderful conclave, because it has brought many people from all over the world, from all over the town. While my subject is ethics and misconduct in arts publication, I would like to say something about research in the sphere of the humanities. Because all this time that we have been talking about, we've been talking about original research, about new arenas of knowledge opening up for us. But when we come to the humanities, the arts, when we talk about literature, history, philosophy, there's really nothing new under the sun. So what we are doing, we are building up on existing frameworks of knowledge. We are actually acquiring, or we are adhering to certain conceptual frameworks, certain theoretical frameworks, and it is within those that we pitch our research, that within those that we structure our research. So in our research, this whole thing about citation, acknowledgement, building up on the knowledge that is there before us, or building on, or taking from, is the most important aspect. So this notion of, as we started in the first session, of how do we cite, how do we acknowledge, where do we place ourselves within that school of thought, is what needs to be inculcated. And as teachers, as professors then in the humanities, we have to equip our students with these frameworks of thought. Are we now following a Marxian analysis? Is it a post-structuralist analysis? So these conceptual frameworks are really what guides our research, and that is where we foreground ourselves and bring ourselves forward as researchers. Because as Professor Enamul Haq just said, if you think, what's original? Michael Madhusudhan Dutta, the first modern poet in Bengal, he was imitating Milton, we can say that. But in that process of imitation, the new form of epic writing, of the new form of blank verse gets evolved. And it is this thread that we draw from what existed before that creates what is new. So it is in this admixture that we place ourselves. And here I think is where the most important resource for us is that repository of knowledge. That repository of knowledge, which in all parts of the world is contained, and here I would again like to thank Hasina, is contained in libraries. And the richer this resource is available to you, the library repository that you have is there for you, the richer will be your ability, the better will be your ability to research, and the richer and deeper the research findings that you will come up with. For us, growing up in Dhaka University, the library resources were limited in one way and very rich in another. The richness of our Dhaka University library, we never explored till we became faculty members, because we have a huge repository of 19th century writing from this part of the world, which is gathering mold and dust, etc. We have the Bangla Academy Library, which also is a very, very rich resource for students of literature. Now in this digital age, and where we, through JSTOR and other instruments, are accessing articles, research articles from all over the world, we need to create a repository of our own. And that repository, maybe we need journals to be enlisted with JSTOR. We need local publications to be enlisted with JSTOR. So the fear that was that our research is not heard of, is not seen, is not visible, that at least we can then build up our own repository. So this repository repository of knowledge, what we call the archive. The archive needs to be really developed. And as researchers in the humanities and the arts, we build up personally an archive through our own history of research, through our own research history. And there I think, we've been talking so much about plagiarism, I feel there's a huge danger of plagiarizing yourself, because you're building on and building on, so you're repeating yourself, and as you're repeating yourself, what is the new thing that you're saying in your 2018 publication, which you didn't say in your 2008, though it's within the framework, the same field. So these are the places where the researcher in the arts have to be very, very careful. The other thing about the arts and the humanities is that it exists, and it has always existed, in a globalized sphere. Now, there has been then an accusation against people like me doing English literature. So what's relevant about this? And that is something that we are always looking for relevance. Now, relevance to the society, good to the society, ethical questions. Besides, how does this reflect or analyze things within your own society? So again, if we come back to that question of wider frameworks, my department, English and Humanities, has been involved with the Glasgow University on a research, in a poverty research network. So when I was invited to this, I thought, what on earth am I going to do here? It's not my field. But I suggested that we look at the words that define poverty in different spaces, that define poverty in policy spaces, in social movements, as well as in poetry. So we look at how words traverse different spaces. But a colleague of mine, who unfortunately has left us now, embarked within this project into a very interesting research on the poetry of migrant workers from Bangladesh to different parts of the world. And what she discovered then feeds into what today we call minor cosmopolitanisms, that this is a cosmopolitan world where the movements of peoples which have been there forever and ever have acquired new dimensions. So how do people configure home? How do they configure nostalgia? How do they configure homesickness? How do they look at these new boundaries that are opening up for them? And doing this research, helping her, I came across this wonderful repository of Syrian refugee poetry. So poetry itself then bespeaks the modern world, bespeaks the contemporary world in ways that perhaps data doesn't, perhaps field work doesn't, but it really adds another dimension to that research that we need to look at. So I think research in the humanities, research in the arts has a wide arena to follow. Many ethical questions arise through that. Many conceptual openings can be devised through that. And if we can get our research into the global sphere, we get it by how? By these links that we make with Western universities, or by publishing in Western journals. But if we could get our own research published ourselves and available to the wider world, then conversations can take place which will be much more interesting. One of the things I want to say as a researcher of the humanities and as a feminist researcher, I was reading about it in The Economist only yesterday, that they have two people embarked on a spoof, and they published things about gender dimensions and various, all of it was lies. They hadn't even done that research. There was no such project. But all these journals accepted these. They were peer-reviewed and all that. But I have seen these kind of spoofs are normally done about arts research, humanities research, because we don't have that validation field. So maybe we need to devise ways of how this research can be validated better, so that the external peer reviewers have standards against which they can be judged, and this constant spoofing that my field is subject to doesn't occur. Before I end, I want to echo the confession that was made in the first by Professor Khan, that there is a confession to be made by all of us, I think. We all use photocopied material, completely overlooking the copyright things. And I think we should do that, because knowledge bastabundi kore rakhar kichu na. It should be out there in the open world once it's published, and we cannot order 120 books in the library for each student to have. So we have to pick and choose, and we have to. So let us also, while we talk about ethics and integrity, think about international standards, think about what is the need of the day and how we can proceed with it. Thank you.